This presentation is for my final project for cultural anthropology. It is on deaf culture. So, what is deaf culture? Deaf culture is a set of learned behaviors and perceptions that shape the values and norms of deaf people based on their shared experiences. On the right, you will see a picture of the College of St. Scholastica, ASL, and Deaf Culture Club, accompanied in the middle by pro mixed martial artist Matt Hamill. So, the first reason that I chose this topic is because I feel that it is very important and interesting. So, deaf culture has its own traditions, including films, folklore, celebrations, deaf clubs, theater, and reunions. Deaf culture also includes its own music, poetry, and dance. Below, you'll see a picture, and if you would click on that picture, you will be rerouted to YouTube to watch Pharrell Williams' song Happy, sign language interpreted. The second reason is because sign language is inclusive of specific rules of behavior in communication in addition to the conventional rules of turn taking. So some characteristics are consistent eye contact and visual attention during the conversation is expected. And a person using sign language has the floor during a conversation until he or she provides a visual indicator that he or she is finished. So a pause or a facial expression can act as visual indicators. The third reason is because I believe deaf people have been underrepresented and misrepresented in American history and are still subject to autism in today's society. So, a little bit on autism. You can see the definition below, but autism is the notion that one is superior based on one's ability to hear or to behave in the manner of one who hears, or that life without hearing is futile and miserable, or an attitude based on pathological thinking, which results in a negative stigma toward anyone who does not hear. So, some current people who are prominent in today's deaf culture society are Beethoven's Nightmare and Matt Hamill. Beethoven's Nightmare is the world's only deaf rock band. Its members consist of Bob Hilterman, Ed Chevy, and Steve Longo. Recently, this past fall, the College of St. Scholastica ASL and Deaf Culture Club hosted Ed Chevy, who provided ASL interpreted music performance. This spring, we invited Matt Hamill, who is a deaf mixed martial artist, to give a inspirational speech at the college. And Matt Hamill was the first deaf wrestler to win a national championship in college, to which he went on to win two more. And in 2010, Hollywood released a movie called The Hammer, which was a movie based on his life. So the reason that Beethoven's Nightmare and Matt Hamill are important are because they act as role models and examples for the deaf community, showing that just because one can't hear doesn't mean they can't thrive and succeed in a hearing world. So, one very prominent place in deaf culture is Gallaudet University. It is known as the Mecca of deaf culture and was started in 1864. Gallaudet University is the world's only barrier-free university for the deaf and hard of hearing students. Currently, there are students from the United States and 25 other countries that study there. Deaf culture has a strong background in poetry and storytelling, which is used to empower deaf people. In one classic deaf story, a man leaves his hotel room in the middle of the night and forgets which room is his, as all the lights are off and he can't remember his room number. He then has to problem solve to find which room him and his wife are staying in. Both him and his wife are deaf. This story was adapted and made into a Super Bowl ad by Pepsi. You'll notice on the bottom left, there is a bald man in the picture. If you click on that photo, you will be rerouted to watch the original story signed in ASL. And if you click on the bottom right picture of the two men in the car, you will then watch the ad by Pepsi. So why are people drawn to the deaf community? So deaf culture views being deaf as a difference in experience in life and not as a medical disability. So the deaf community welcomes those who fit core requirements. You have to be able to use sign language. You have to have some level of hearing loss, so either completely deaf, hard of hearing. You have to be politically aware of deaf actions around the globe, regionally, locally, and you have to prefer to socialize with the deaf and hard of hearing. Another reason is that in a study conducted by the Journal of Deaf Studies and Deaf Education, it's been shown that deaf individuals who were involved in the deaf community and who self-identified as deaf displayed a higher self-esteem than those who were not a part of that community. Some more reasons is that recently TV shows have been featuring deaf characters and have received higher media exposure because of it. In 1988 at Gallaudet University, they were in the process of hiring a new president for the university. There were 3 candidates. 2 of them were deaf and 1 was hearing. And what ended up happening is the university board ended up selecting the hearing candidate over the 2 deaf candidates. And in 1988, the students organized protests demanding the removal of the hearing president and other demands as well. And this ended up with the board being redesigned and the election of a deaf president. At this time, deaf activism also became noticed and piqued the interest of hearing individuals. So some mythology behind deaf culture. Again, being deaf is not considered a problem that needs to be fixed. The use of sign language is central and key to one's identity. Sign language has its own grammar. The opposition of discrimination against deaf people, their own set of rules for etiquette. Sign language is very detailed and conversation is very straightforward. And in deaf culture, there is a sense to find connectedness or common ground between 2 deaf individuals, and the prevalence of storytelling and poetry in deaf culture. So some conflicts and tensions. In 1880 in Milan, Italy, there was an educational conference, and the result of that conference ended in the banning of sign language in classrooms. And this is called oralism, so teaching through hearing. This not only had consequences locally, but around the world. It affected classrooms all over the globe, including the United States. Sign language was not allowed to be used in the classroom. Sometimes it was against the law to be used in the classroom. And at this point, sign language really took a hit, and it is often called the dark ages of sign language. After sign language was allowed back into the classrooms, the English language really tried to take over sign language, and Some signs which had previously existed were then altered to make more sense for hearing people to understand them. One example is the sign for live is you have your hands in the thumbs up position and you raise them against your chest to your shoulders. That is the original sign, but now after the English language tried to take over, the sign became your hands in the shape of the letter L and then move up. So that's one example. Another conflict is the focus on lip reading in today's society. One common misconception is that all deaf people can lip read and all deaf people should lip read. Lip reading is not a deaf person's first means of communication. Sign language is. When lip reading is emphasized over learning sign language, it is often also seen as a threat to deaf culture. And then we have technological advancements. Today, technological advancements such as Facebook and other social media sites, also mobile devices and texting have made it easier to communicate for deaf and hearing people. However, it has gotten rid of face-to-face communication, which had a key part in deaf culture, which often brought the communities of deaf people together. And there was and still is controversy around the use of hearing aids and cochlear implants. In the early 2000s, it was a huge issue among deaf people relating to the use of hearing assistive technology, saying that it threatened deaf culture and it eliminated the need for sign language. So some cultural identifiers. So in deaf culture, race, gender, class, age, and status are all tied in. Deaf culture intersects with these cultural identifiers, creating a culture which may be small but incredibly diverse. In deaf culture, it's not so much who you are as much as if you are deaf. That is important. So, how is deaf culture related to space, language, relationships, the body, and clothing? So, in relation to space, in deaf culture, sight is everything, and the line of sight. I spoke to one of my professors on campus who teaches American Sign Language, and she said that in the classroom, it's ideal if you can use a fishbowl setting so that everyone can see everyone. There has to be good lighting to be able to see the signs that are being made. And there also needs to be an absence of visual noise. So visual noise might be fidgeting with your hands. If you're out at a restaurant, there'll be menus and salt and pepper and napkins in the middle of the table. So those might need to be pushed off to the side to reduce the visual noise. Language, in the United States, American Sign Language is the main means of communication between deaf people, but ASL is not universal. There are different sign languages around the globe. There's Chinese Sign Language, there's French Sign Language, there's British Sign Language, and all have different signs. Relationships, a big factor in relationships is the community of deaf people versus the family of a deaf person. Oftentimes, a deaf person has a better relationship with the deaf community they're a part of rather than their own family that they live with. Deaf people also tend to form relationships quickly with each other. The body, deaf people tend to have different concepts of personal space and bodily expressions. In American Sign Language, there are things called mouth morphemes, which are the shapes the mouth makes during specific signs. There's also facial grammar when questioning people. And clothing, one way that deaf culture has affected clothing is that for those who act as interpreters, it is often expected and required that they wear dark colors so that their skin and hands may pop out. So, a change in influence. So, over time, especially recently, there's been more recognition and acceptance of those who are deaf. There's also been a shift to viewing those who are deaf as a linguistic minority rather than a disabled person. And there's a hope for humanity to be able to come together as a community and to be able to show mutual respect for each other and understanding of each other's differences and being able to see the gifts everyone has to offer. So I wanted to end by reading off some important quotes that I found that I feel really summarize. So this first quote and the second are by George Viditz, who was the president of the National Association of the Deaf. So the first quote is, "As long as we have deaf people on earth, we will have signs, and as long as we have our films, we can preserve our beautiful language in its original purity. It is our hope that we will all love and guard our beautiful sign language as the noblest gift God has given to deaf people." The second quote is, "They are facing not a theory, but a condition, for they are first, last, and all the time the people of the eye." And this third quote is by Jack R. Cannon. "We have been called deaf mutes, objects of charity, deaf and dumb, semi-mutes, dummy, and now hearing impaired. We have been described as the most misunderstood among the sons of man. Some of us are deaf and some of us are deaf. Some of us use American Sign Language and some of us do not. This exhibition is out untold and largely unknown story. It is American history through deaf eyes." And that ends my presentation.